What if I told you that some of the most famous stories you've ever heard about history are completely false? Welcome to our journey through the 20 greatest historical myths. Buckle up for a wild ride through time as we debunk some of the most intriguing myths in history. From the tale of George Washington and the cherry tree to the myth of Napoleon's height, get ready for a mix of shocking revelations, fun facts, and a whole lot of surprises. Make sure to stay with us until the end, because what you think you know about history is about to change forever. Myth: Cleopatra was Egyptian. Despite how Cleopatra is often depicted as the quintessential Egyptian queen, her actual heritage tells a different story. Cleopatra was not ethnically Egyptian. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great's conquest. Cleopatra was a descendant of Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's generals. Therefore, she was of Greek Macedonian origin. Cleopatra was the first in her family to actually learn and embrace the Egyptian language and customs, which likely contributed to the common misconception of her being Egyptian by birth. She portrayed herself as the reincarnation of the Egyptian goddess Isis, further intertwining her image with Egyptian culture. Cleopatra's ability to adapt and blend into the native culture was a testament to her political acumen and her desire to connect with the Egyptian people she ruled over. So, while Cleopatra will forever be linked with Egypt, it's essential to recognize her true Greek origins in understanding her historical narrative. Myth: Vikings wore horned helmets. The popular image of Viking warriors charging into battle with horned helmets is one of the most pervasive historical myths, but it's also one of the most inaccurate. The idea of Vikings wearing horned helmets primarily comes from 19th century Romanticism and the works of costume designers for operas like Richard Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen. In reality, archaeological evidence has never supported the notion that Vikings wore such helmets. The helmets that have been found from the Viking Age are simple and practical, designed for protection rather than decoration. These helmets were typically made of iron and had a rounded or conical shape, sometimes including a nose guard but never horns. The horned helmet myth likely gained traction because it makes for a dramatic and fearsome image, which was useful for storytelling and artistic representations. However, this depiction does a disservice to the true image of the Viking warrior, who relied on practicality and efficiency in their armor and weaponry. Vikings were skilled artisans and seafarers, known for their longships and raids, but also for their trade and exploration. Understanding the reality of Viking gear helps us appreciate their rich culture and the sophisticated technology they employed, rather than the romanticized and inaccurate portrayals we see today. So, the next time you see a Viking with a horned helmet, remember, it's pure fiction, not history. The third myth involves the Great Wall of China and its supposed visibility from space. The claim that this colossal structure can be seen from space with the naked eye is one of the most popular historical myths. In reality, however, astronauts have debunked this myth numerous times. The Great Wall, while impressive in length and historical significance, is actually not discernible to the naked eye from the vantage point of low Earth orbit. The misconception likely originated from a combination of the wall's enormous size and its iconic status, which made it an easy candidate for such a claim. Astronauts from various space missions, including those from NASA, have confirmed that while many man-made objects are visible from space, the Great Wall is not one of them. Its materials and color blend too well with the natural landscape of northern China to stand out from such a great distance. The belief that the Great Wall can be seen from space is more a testament to its grandeur and the fascination it holds rather than its actual visibility. This myth serves as a reminder to question seemingly factual statements and seek confirmation from scientific evidence. So the next time you hear that the Great Wall of China is visible from space, remember that this is just another example of how myths can persist despite evidence to the contrary. The fourth myth involves Napoleon Bonaparte and the widespread belief that he was extremely short. The origins of this myth likely stem from a combination of factors, including political propaganda and differences in height measurement systems of the time. Napoleon's enemies often portrayed him as diminutive to belittle and ridicule him. However, historical records indicate that Napoleon was approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was average for a Frenchman of his era. This height confusion also arose from the fact that French inches were longer than British inches. Thus, when his height was translated from French to English measurements, it appeared to be shorter. The perpetuation of this myth has led to the term Napoleon complex, describing a psychological condition wherein short individuals may exhibit overly aggressive or domineering behavior to compensate for their height. In reality, Napoleon's military prowess and leadership were far from being hindered by his stature. He was an acclaimed commander who rose to prominence through his strategic brilliance and ambition. Understanding the truth about Napoleon's height helps us appreciate his accomplishments without the distortion of caricatured depictions. So, while Napoleon is often remembered as a tiny tyrant, the reality is that his stature was quite ordinary for his time. Myth: Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." The popular narrative that Marie Antoinette, upon hearing that the peasants had no bread, callously declared, "Let them eat cake," is one of the most enduring falsehoods in history. Despite its widespread acceptance, there is no reliable historical evidence that she ever uttered these words. The phrase, "let them eat cake," is believed to have first appeared in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions, a work published in the 1760s, long before Marie Antoinette became Queen of France. Rousseau attributed this insensitive remark to a great princess, but he never specified who, leaving room for later misattribution. Marie Antoinette, who was often unfairly vilified in revolutionary propaganda, became an easy target for this myth. Her lavish lifestyle and foreign birth made her a symbol of royal excess and disconnect from the plight of the common people. However, historical records suggest that she showed concern for the poor and even engaged in charitable activities. The misattributed quote reflects more about the propagandist efforts to demonize the monarchy than any actual statement by the Queen. Understanding the truth behind this myth allows us to see Marie Antoinette in a more nuanced light, recognizing the complexities of her position and the turbulent times in which she lived. So when you hear the phrase, "let them eat cake," remember it's a fabricated statement, not a historical fact, serving more as a tool of revolutionary rhetoric than an accurate reflection of Marie Antoinette's character. The sixth myth involves the widely held belief that people in the Middle Ages thought the Earth was flat. This misconception has been perpetuated for generations, but in reality, educated individuals during that time knew the Earth was spherical. The myth likely gained traction due to simplifications in historical narratives and misrepresentations in later periods. In fact, the knowledge of a spherical Earth dates back to ancient Greece. Philosophers like Pythagoras and Aristotle provided evidence for a round Earth long before the Middle Ages. By the time of medieval Europe, scholars were well aware of this concept. For instance, the Venerable Bede, an English monk from the early 8th century, wrote about the Earth as a sphere in his scientific treatises. Additionally, medieval universities included the study of the Earth's sphericity in their curricula, reflecting a continued understanding of this scientific fact. The flat Earth myth was popularized in the 19th century by writers who oversimplified or distorted medieval history to create a narrative of progress from ignorance to enlightenment. This false portrayal serves to undermine the intellectual achievements of medieval scholars. Recognizing the truth about medieval beliefs regarding the Earth's shape helps us appreciate the continuity of scientific knowledge and the sophistication of medieval scholarship. So, the next time you hear that people in the Middle Ages believed in a flat Earth, remember that this is a myth, not a historical reality. The seventh myth involves the widespread belief that witches were burned at the stake during the Salem Witch Trials. Contrary to popular depictions, none of the accused witches in Salem were burned. The actual fate of those convicted was hanging. The Salem Witch Trials, which occurred in 1692 in colonial Massachusetts, led to the execution of 20 people, 19 of whom were hanged. One man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. The misconception about burning likely stems from European witch trials, where burning at the stake was a common method of execution. However, in Salem, the legal penalties followed English laws that prescribed hanging for the crime of witchcraft. Understanding the true historical events challenges the dramatic and often sensationalized versions we see in media. It also highlights the grave consequences of mass hysteria and the scapegoating of innocent people. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of superstition and the importance of due process and rationality. Recognizing these facts helps to correct historical inaccuracies and honor the memory of those who suffered under false accusations. So the next time you hear about witches being burned at the stake in Salem, remember that this is a myth, not a historical fact. The eighth myth involves the widely believed notion that Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds in history, failed math. This myth has permeated popular culture and is often used to suggest that even geniuses can struggle academically. However, this claim is completely unfounded. Historical records show that Einstein excelled in mathematics from a young age. By the time he was 15, he had already mastered differential and integral calculus, subjects that are often challenging even for college students. The misconception likely arises from a misunderstanding or misreporting of Einstein's academic records. At one point, he did fail an entrance exam to the Zurich Polytechnic School, but it was not the math section he struggled with. It was the non-scientific subjects that caused the issue, such as language and literature. Moreover, the grading system in Einstein's Swiss school was reversed compared to what many people are accustomed to, where a grade of 6 indicated the highest mark and 1 the lowest. This may have led to further confusion and the perpetuation of the myth. Einstein himself found the rumors amusing and once laughed at the idea, stating that he had never failed math. Understanding the truth about Einstein's academic performance not only corrects this popular myth, but also allows us to appreciate his true genius. His groundbreaking contributions to physics, including the theory of relativity, were built on a robust foundation of mathematical prowess. So, the next time you hear that Albert Einstein failed math, remember that this is just another myth, not a historical fact. The ninth myth involves the famous tale of George Washington and the cherry tree. This story has become a staple in American folklore, often used to highlight the virtues of honesty and integrity. According to the legend, a young George Washington received a hatchet as a gift and used it to damage his father's beloved cherry tree. When confronted by his father, George allegedly confessed to the deed, famously saying, "I cannot tell a lie, I did cut it with my hatchet." However, this anecdote is purely fictional. The story was first popularized by Mason Locke Weems, one of Washington's early biographers. Weems included the cherry tree tale in his 1806 book, The Life of Washington, to illustrate Washington's moral character and to provide a relatable example of virtue for young readers. There is no historical evidence to support that this event ever took place. Scholars widely regard it as a fabrication by Weems, crafted to create a moral lesson rather than a factual recount of Washington's youth. While the cherry tree story has endured in popular culture, it should be recognized as a myth rather than a historical fact. Understanding the origin of this tale helps us appreciate the complexity of historical narratives and the ways in which they can be shaped by later interpretations and intentions. So, the next time you hear about George Washington and the cherry tree, remember that this charming story is a myth, not a reflection of historical reality. The 10th myth involves the popular belief that the Vikings were the first Europeans to discover America. While it's true that Norse explorers like Leif Erikson reached North American shores around the year 1000, they were not the first people to set foot on American soil. The indigenous peoples had been living in the Americas for thousands of years before the arrival of any Europeans. The Norse expeditions to North America, particularly to a site they called Vinland, which is believed to be in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada, are well documented in the Icelandic sagas. These accounts describe Leif Erikson's journey to a place with wild grapes and abundant resources. However, the Norse settlements did not last long and were eventually abandoned due to conflicts with the indigenous populations and difficulties in maintaining supply lines from Greenland and Iceland. It wasn't until almost 500 years later, in 1492, that Christopher Columbus's voyages opened the way for sustained European exploration and colonization of the Americas. Columbus's expeditions, although not the first, had a far more significant and lasting impact on world history through the extensive contact and exchange between the Old and New Worlds. Understanding the context and limitations of the Norse explorations helps us appreciate the broader scope of human history and the many cultures involved in shaping the Americas. So, while the Vikings were indeed remarkable explorers who reached North America long before Columbus, they were not the first people to discover the continent, and their presence did not lead to lasting European colonization. Myth: the pyramids were built by slaves. Contrary to the popular belief that slaves were forced to build the majestic pyramids of Egypt, evidence suggests a more nuanced reality involving skilled laborers. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that the workforce behind the pyramids was composed of paid laborers, not slaves. These workers were organized into well-structured teams, living in nearby temporary workers' villages. The discovery of these villages, complete with bakeries, kitchens, and sleeping quarters, indicates a well-fed and cared-for workforce. Many of these laborers were highly skilled craftsmen and builders, whose expertise was crucial in constructing such monumental structures. Records show that the workers were well compensated for their labor and even received medical care, further dispelling the notion of a slave-driven construction. This organized workforce was likely composed of farmers during the flood season when farming was impossible, allowing them to earn wages during the agricultural downtime. The myth of slave labor likely gained traction due to historical misinterpretations and the dramatic appeal of depicting ancient Egypt as a society built on oppression and forced labor. In reality, the construction of the pyramids required significant expertise, planning, and resources, reflecting an advanced and organized society. Recognizing the true nature of the workforce behind the pyramids not only corrects a widespread misconception, but also offers a deeper appreciation of the skills and dedication involved in these iconic constructions. So, the next time you hear that the pyramids were built by slaves, remember that this is a myth, not a historical fact. The 12th myth involves the romanticized notion that medieval knights were paragons of chivalry and honor. While popular culture often depicts knights as noble and virtuous warriors adhering strictly to a code of chivalry, the reality was far more complex and less idealized. The code of chivalry, as it is popularly understood, was more of an aspirational guideline than a universal standard of behavior. Historical records show that knights, like any other group of people, were capable of both honorable and dishonorable actions. Many knights engaged in acts of brutality, greed, and betrayal, often driven by personal gain or political motivations. The ideal of chivalry included values such as bravery, courtesy, honor, and protecting the weak, but these principles were frequently violated in practice. For instance, during the Crusades, knights participating in these religious wars often committed atrocities against both enemy combatants and civilians. Additionally, in the context of feudal Europe, knights were involved in numerous internecine conflicts, where the code of chivalry was often disregarded in favor of pragmatic and ruthless tactics. The romanticized image of chivalrous knights largely stems from later literary works, such as those by Geoffrey Chaucer and Sir Thomas Malory, which celebrated and embellished these ideals. These stories, while captivating, are not accurate reflections of the typical behavior of medieval knights. Understanding the disparity between the myth and the reality of knightly conduct allows us to gain a more nuanced perspective on medieval history and the complexities of human behavior. So, while the image of the chivalrous knight endures in our cultural imagination, it's important to remember that this portrayal is more myth than historical fact. The 13th myth involves the dramatic portrayal of gladiators always fighting to the death. Contrary to the popular depiction in movies and television, gladiatorial combat in ancient Rome was not solely about bloody, fatal battles. Gladiators were highly trained professionals, often with significant investments made in their training and upkeep. Owners wanted their gladiators to survive multiple bouts, as a dead gladiator meant the loss of a valuable asset. The reality of gladiatorial combat was more structured and regulated than the myth suggests. Matches were often overseen by referees who could stop the fight if one gladiator was seriously injured. Many combats concluded when one fighter conceded defeat rather than continuing until one died. The defeated gladiator could appeal to the presiding official, and the audience would often have a say in his fate, signaled by the famous thumbs up or thumbs down gesture. It was common for the defeated gladiator to be spared if he fought bravely. Additionally, some gladiatorial contests were exhibitions of skill rather than life and death struggles, involving mock battles or practice sessions. The emphasis was on entertainment, skill, and spectacle rather than sheer brutality. While there were undoubtedly instances where gladiators fought to the death, these were not the norm. Recognizing the true nature of gladiatorial combat helps dispel the myth of constant fatality and highlights the complexity of Roman entertainment and societal values. So, the next time you see gladiators depicted as always fighting to the death, remember that this is a myth, not a reflection of historical reality. The 14th myth involves the widely held belief that Vincent van Gogh cut off his entire ear. This dramatic and often sensationalized story has permeated popular culture, but the reality is somewhat different. What truly happened is that Van Gogh only cut off a portion of his left ear, not the entire ear. This incident occurred in December 1888 during a period of mental instability and intense emotional distress. The events leading up to the act were complex and involved a volatile relationship with fellow artist Paul Gauguin, with whom Van Gogh had been living in Arles, France. After a heated argument, Van Gogh's mental state deteriorated, leading him to mutilate his ear. He then wrapped the severed part in cloth and delivered it to a local brothel worker named Rachel, a move that has puzzled historians and psychologists ever since. The precise reasons behind Van Gogh's actions remain unclear, often attributed to a combination of factors including his struggle with mental illness, possibly bipolar disorder or epilepsy, and his feelings of isolation and despair. Van Gogh himself was hospitalized immediately after the incident, and his condition led to further hospitalizations and eventually his voluntary admission to a mental asylum. Despite his struggles, Van Gogh continued to produce some of his most iconic works during this period, illustrating his remarkable resilience and dedication to his art. Understanding the truth behind the myth of Van Gogh's ear helps us appreciate the complexity of his life and the profound challenges he faced. So, the next time you hear that Van Gogh cut off his entire ear, remember that this is a myth and the reality involves only a portion of his ear, reflecting a tragic chapter in the life of this extraordinary artist. The myth that Christopher Columbus proved the Earth is round has been widely believed, but it doesn't hold up to historical scrutiny. In reality, the knowledge that the Earth is spherical dates back to ancient Greek philosophers. For instance, Pythagoras proposed that the Earth was round as early as the 6th century BC, and later, Aristotle provided further evidence through observations like the shape of the Earth's shadow on the Moon during a lunar eclipse. By the time of Columbus's voyage in 1492, educated individuals in Europe were well aware that the Earth was not flat. The real debate of Columbus's time wasn't about the shape of the Earth, but rather its size and the feasibility of reaching Asia by sailing west. Many scholars and navigators of the era correctly believed that the Earth was much larger than Columbus estimated, which is why they were skeptical of his plan. Columbus, on the other hand, underestimated the Earth's circumference and the distance to Asia, leading to his accidental encounter with the Americas. The myth that Columbus proved the Earth is round likely originated from later retellings of his journey, which simplified the story for dramatic effect. This misconception diminishes the accomplishments of earlier thinkers and misrepresents the state of geographical knowledge in the late 15th century. Recognizing the true context of Columbus's voyage allows us to better appreciate the rich history of scientific understanding that predated his journey. So the next time you hear that Columbus proved the Earth is round, remember that this is a myth, not a historical fact. Educated people had known about the Earth's roundness for nearly 2 millennia before Columbus set sail. The 16th myth involves the famous tale of Lady Godiva riding naked through the streets of Coventry. According to the legend, Lady Godiva, a noblewoman, rode through the town unclothed to protest the oppressive taxation imposed by her husband, Leofric, the Earl of Mercia. The story goes that she made this bold sacrifice to gain relief for the citizens of Coventry. However, the historical accuracy of this tale is highly questionable. The earliest recorded mention of Lady Godiva's ride comes from the 13th century chronicle by Roger of Wendover, a monk who added colorful stories to his writings. Historians have found no evidence in contemporary records from the 11th century, when Lady Godiva lived, to support the claim of her naked ride. It's more likely that the tale evolved over time, embellished by storytellers and later popularized by poets like Alfred, Lord Tennyson in his 19th century poem, Godiva. The legend also includes the character of Peeping Tom, a tailor who secretly watched Lady Godiva and was struck blind or dead as a result, further adding to the myth's dramatic elements. In reality, Lady Godiva was a pious and charitable woman known for her benefactions to religious institutions. She and her husband Leofric were substantial donors to various monasteries and churches, including the founding of a Benedictine house in Coventry. The myth of her naked ride seems to overshadow her genuine contributions to society. Understanding the probable facts behind Lady Godiva's story allows us to appreciate her true legacy while recognizing how myths can distort historical figures for dramatic and moralistic purposes. So the next time you hear the story of Lady Godiva's naked ride through Coventry, remember that this is likely a myth, not a historical fact, and her real legacy lies in her charitable works and influence. The 17th myth involves the well-known story that Emperor Nero fiddled while Rome burned. This popular tale suggests that Nero was indifferent to the suffering of his people, playing music as the city was engulfed in flames. However, this narrative is not supported by historical evidence and is more a product of later interpretations and biases against Nero. Firstly, the fiddle did not even exist during Nero's time. If he played any instrument, it would have likely been the lyre, which was common in ancient Rome. More importantly, contemporary sources suggest that Nero was not in Rome when the fire started. According to historical accounts such as those by Tacitus, Nero was at his villa in Antium when the Great Fire of Rome broke out in 64 AD. Upon hearing the news, he reportedly rushed back to the city to coordinate relief efforts. Tacitus mentions that Nero opened his palaces to provide shelter for the homeless and arranged for food supplies to be delivered to those in need. He even planned the construction of a new city with improved fireproofing measures. The myth of Nero fiddling likely originated from later writings by historians who were hostile to him and sought to tarnish his reputation. These accounts painted Nero as a tyrant who was disconnected from the realities of his subjects' suffering. Additionally, Nero's decision to rebuild parts of Rome in a grander style, including the construction of his opulent Domus Aurea or Golden House, may have fueled suspicions and later exaggerations of his actions and intentions. The reality of Nero's reign is complex, marked by both achievements and controversies. He was a patron of the arts and initiated several public works projects, but his reign also saw significant political turmoil and brutal suppression of dissent. Understanding the truth behind the myth of Nero fiddling while Rome burned allows us to view him as a multifaceted historical figure rather than a one-dimensional villain. So the next time you hear about Nero playing the fiddle during the Great Fire of Rome, remember that this is a myth, not a historical fact, and the true story is much more nuanced. The 18th myth involves the belief that ancient Spartans routinely threw weak or deformed infants off cliffs as a form of eugenics. This grim image is a staple in popular culture, often used to illustrate Spartan society's harshness and focus on physical perfection. However, the historical reality is more complex and less clear-cut. The myth likely stems from a misunderstanding or exaggeration of Spartan practices related to child rearing and fitness assessments. It is true that Spartans placed a high value on physical strength and fitness, given their militaristic society's emphasis on producing capable warriors. Newborns were indeed subjected to an inspection by the elders of the community known as the Gerousia. If an infant was deemed unhealthy or unfit, the child might not have been raised by the family, but this did not necessarily mean they were thrown off a cliff. Some historical accounts suggest that rejected infants were left at the base of Mount Taygetus, where they could be exposed to the elements. This practice of exposure was not unique to Sparta and was a common method in ancient Greece for dealing with unwanted or severely disabled infants. However, modern historians argue that many such infants may have been rescued and taken in by other families or communities. The portrayal of Spartans as mercilessly throwing infants from cliffs likely became exaggerated through later historical accounts and cultural retellings. The notion serves to emphasize the extreme and often harsh measures attributed to Spartan society, but does not fully align with archaeological evidence or contemporary accounts. Recognizing the truth behind this myth allows for a more nuanced understanding of Spartan practices and society, acknowledging their stringent approach to physical fitness while dispelling the notion of systematic infanticide. So, the next time you hear that Spartans threw weak babies off cliffs, remember that this is an exaggerated myth, and the reality involves a more complex understanding of ancient societal practices. The 19th myth involves the legendary Trojan horse, often depicted as a grand wooden horse used by the Greeks to infiltrate and ultimately conquer the city of Troy. This tale is one of the most famous stories from ancient Greek mythology, immortalized in literary works like Homer's The Iliad and Virgil's The Aeneid. According to the myth, the Greeks constructed a massive wooden horse and hid a select force of soldiers inside. They then pretended to abandon their siege, leaving the horse as a supposed offering to the gods. The Trojans, believing they had won, brought the horse within their city walls to celebrate. Once night fell and the city was asleep, the Greek soldiers emerged from the horse, opened the gates for the rest of their army, and sacked Troy. While this story makes for an enthralling narrative, the historical accuracy of the Trojan horse is highly questionable. Most historians and archaeologists regard the tale as purely mythological rather than a factual account of how Troy fell. The concept of a wooden horse could have been a symbolic representation or an allegory for a different kind of subterfuge. Some scholars suggest that the horse could have been a metaphor for a siege engine or battering ram designed to breach the city's fortifications. Another theory posits that the story of the Trojan horse may have originated from military tactics used in other ancient battles, which were later embellished and incorporated into the mythological canon. Additionally, the story serves a broader narrative purpose, exemplifying themes of cunning, deception, and the consequences of hubris. Recognizing the layers of myth and symbolism in the tale of the Trojan horse helps us appreciate its literary and cultural significance while acknowledging the lack of concrete historical evidence. So, the next time you hear about the Trojan horse as a literal wooden construct, remember that this is more a captivating myth than a verified historical event, reflecting the rich tapestry of ancient storytelling rather than factual history. The 20th myth involves the commonly held belief that the Dark Ages were a time of ignorance and backwardness. Contrary to this widespread notion, the period from the fall of the Roman Empire to the beginning of the Renaissance, roughly from the 5th to the 14th century, was not as dark as often portrayed. While it is true that Europe faced significant challenges during this time, such as political fragmentation, invasions, and economic hardship, it was also a period of substantial intellectual, cultural, and scientific development. The term Dark Ages itself was coined by Renaissance scholars who perceived the preceding centuries as lacking the cultural and intellectual achievements they admired. However, modern historians have reassessed this period and found that it was far more dynamic and progressive than previously thought. For instance, the Carolingian Renaissance in the 8th and 9th centuries under Charlemagne witnessed a revival of art, literature, and learning, with the establishment of schools and the preservation of classical texts. Monastic communities played a crucial role in maintaining and transmitting knowledge, preserving ancient manuscripts, and producing new works of theology, philosophy, and science. The medieval universities that emerged in the 12th century, such as those in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford, became centers of learning and scholarly activity, laying the groundwork for the intellectual advancements of the later Renaissance. Notable medieval scholars like Thomas Aquinas, Roger Bacon, and Hildegard of Bingen made significant contributions to fields such as philosophy, natural science, and medicine. Furthermore, technological innovations during this period, including the heavy plow, water mills, and improved navigation techniques, had a profound impact on agriculture, industry, and exploration. The Gothic architectural style, exemplified by cathedrals like Notre Dame and Chartres, showcased remarkable advancements in engineering and aesthetics. Additionally, the period saw the rise of powerful political entities, such as the Holy Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, which helped stabilize and govern large parts of Europe. Trade networks expanded, linking Europe with the broader world, including the Islamic caliphates, which were centers of scientific and cultural flourishing. The transmission of knowledge from the Islamic world, where scholars had preserved and built upon ancient Greek and Roman works, played a significant role in the intellectual development of medieval Europe. Recognizing the complexity and achievements of the so-called Dark Ages allows us to appreciate the diverse and interconnected history of human progress. So the next time you hear that the Dark Ages were solely a time of ignorance and backwardness, remember that this is a myth, and the reality involves a rich tapestry of cultural and intellectual advancements that helped shape the modern world. The 21st bonus myth involves the widely held belief that Leonardo da Vinci's iconic painting, the Mona Lisa, was created in one go. Contrary to this simplified notion, the Mona Lisa underwent multiple stages and required extensive effort over several years to reach its final form. Leonardo da Vinci began working on the portrait around 1503, and it is widely believed that he continued to refine and enhance the painting for at least 4 years, possibly longer. The process behind creating the Mona Lisa was anything but straightforward. Leonardo, known for his meticulous nature and perfectionism, approached the painting with a level of detail and patience that was characteristic of his broader work. The artist employed various techniques such as sfumato, a method of blending colors and tones to create soft transitions and lifelike skin textures, which required numerous layers and careful execution. Additionally, Leonardo's experiments with different materials and underdrawings have been revealed through modern scientific analysis, including infrared and X-ray examinations. These studies have shown that the Mona Lisa underwent significant changes during its creation. For example, earlier versions of the painting display adjustments to the position of the hands, the outlines of the face, and even the background landscape. Leonardo's iterative approach involved constantly reworking and fine-tuning the composition to achieve the depth and realism for which the painting is celebrated. The artist's relentless pursuit of perfection also meant he frequently sought out new techniques and innovative materials, sometimes revisiting the painting after periods of hiatus to apply these fresh insights. Understanding the intricate and painstaking process behind the Mona Lisa's creation allows us to appreciate Leonardo da Vinci's genius and the depth of his artistic commitment. It stands as a testament to his extraordinary skill and the evolving nature of artistic mastery, rather than a product of a single, uninterrupted effort. So, the next time you admire the Mona Lisa, remember that this masterpiece was not created in one go, but rather through a series of meticulous stages and ongoing refinement, reflecting Leonardo's relentless dedication to achieving perfection. The 22nd bonus myth involves the widespread belief that the Loch Ness Monster is a modern phenomenon, primarily emerging from the 20th century. However, tales of a mysterious creature in Loch Ness date back much further, spanning centuries and entwining with Scottish folklore. The earliest recorded reference to a strange aquatic creature in Loch Ness comes from the life of Saint Columba, an Irish monk who is credited with bringing Christianity to Scotland. In a text dating back to 565 AD, a monster is described attacking a swimmer in the River Ness, a tributary of the Loch. Saint Columba is said to have intervened, commanding the creature to retreat, which it reportedly obeyed. This story highlights that the legend of a strange beast in Loch Ness has ancient roots long before the modern era. Throughout medieval times, various local legends and stories mentioned sightings of a water-dwelling creature, often described in ways that resemble accounts of modern sightings. The creature was sometimes depicted as a type of kelpie, a water spirit from Scottish folklore known to inhabit lochs and rivers, often maliciously dragging people underwater. Descriptions varied, but the idea of a large, mysterious beast persisted in the cultural imagination. Fast forward to the 20th century, the myth gained newfound global attention with the famous 1933 sighting by George Spicer, which described a large creature crossing the road in front of his car and entering the loch. This account, alongside the infamous and later debunked 1934 surgeon's photograph showing an iconic image of a long-necked creature, helped cement the Loch Ness Monster's place in contemporary legend. These modern sightings were bolstered by increased media coverage, the advent of photography, and burgeoning public interest in cryptozoology, the study of creatures whose existence is not scientifically proven. It's important to note that the modern phenomenon of the Loch Ness Monster is a blend of ancient mythology and contemporary fascination. The earlier legends provided a foundation upon which modern interpretations and hoaxes could build. While scientific investigations have repeatedly found no evidence to support the existence of a large creature in Loch Ness, the myth endures, fueled by a combination of historical lore, mistaken identities, and imaginative speculation. Understanding the full history behind the Loch Ness Monster allows us to appreciate its deep roots in Scottish culture and the way legends can evolve over time. So, the next time you hear that the Loch Ness Monster is purely a modern creation, remember that this myth has a long and storied history, stretching back to the early medieval period and beyond. Bonus Myth Section 23 Myth: Historical myths never change. Reflecting on the nature of historical myths, it's essential to recognize that they are far from static. Historical myths evolve over time, often adapting to the cultural, social, and political contexts of each generation. This dynamic nature keeps them alive and continually relevant. For example, the myth of Robin Hood has undergone numerous transformations, from medieval ballads depicting him as a yeoman to later stories portraying him as a nobleman wronged by the system. Each retelling adds new elements or shifts perspectives to resonate with contemporary audiences, showing how myths are shaped by the times in which they are told. Similarly, the legend of Atlantis has seen countless reinterpretations since Plato's original accounts, each version reflecting the concerns and fascinations of different eras, from Renaissance explorations to modern-day conspiracy theories. This adaptability allows myths to endure, serving as a mirror for society's evolving values and anxieties. In a way, myths act as cultural barometers, offering insights into the collective psyche of various periods in history. They captivate us not only because of their inherent drama and intrigue, but also because they provide a lens through which we can examine our own world. Myths often address universal themes such as good versus evil, justice, and heroism, which continue to resonate regardless of the specific historical context. This timeless appeal ensures that myths remain compelling, inviting reinterpretations and inspiring new generations. Understanding that historical myths are fluid rather than fixed helps us appreciate their richness and complexity. It also encourages us to approach them with a critical eye, recognizing the ways in which they are reshaped to fit the narratives of different times. So, the next time you hear a historical myth, remember that it is not a static piece of history but a living story that evolves alongside us, reflecting the ever-changing landscape of human experience. In summary, we've journeyed through the 20 greatest historical myths and uncovered some fascinating truths that challenge our perceptions of the past. From Cleopatra's true heritage to the real story behind the Viking helmets, and from Marie Antoinette's infamous quote to the complex myth of the Loch Ness Monster, we've explored how easily misinformation can take root and endure. These myths, while compelling, often obscure the richness and complexity of historical realities. By debunking them, we gain a more accurate and nuanced understanding of the past, bringing us closer to the truth. Thank you for joining us on this adventure through history. We hope this exploration has not only surprised you, but also inspired a deeper curiosity about the stories we take for granted. If you enjoyed this journey into historical mysteries, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear from you. Which myth surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep uncovering the fascinating layers of history.